Okay, this is quiz 1. I'm going to go ahead and work through this. I'm going to work pretty slowly and deliberately, so I'm probably going to take more than the 15 to 20 minutes that the quiz is designed to take, because I'm going to go very slow and I'm going to talk through everything because I want this to be instructional, so you guys watching this will take the quiz correctly. Okay, first thing you need to do is read instructions. A lot of people lose points because they just don't read the instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and read them. Well, first off, I'm going to fill it out correctly. My name is Rick Grush. I am in section A01. Today's date is, holy cow, I don't know. I think it's probably the 4th or something like that. I'll just say the 4th. And I don't fill out the score. Whoever's grading it will fill out the score. Okay. Quiz has 10 questions. It's worth 100 points total, which is about 11% of the total points in the course. Point values for each question are listed in brackets after the number. That's right here. So question 1 is worth 10 points. 5 points on the exam are earned by filling the quiz out correctly, which means putting my name, correct section number on the quiz, marking answers on the quiz itself, meaning putting like an X or filling in these brackets. And I want to emphasize something, because here I've added this because people were doing this and you shouldn't do it. It's not in the practice version in the text, but it is going to be on the quiz that you actually take. So listen to this. 4 multiple choice questions. Just mark the box. That means this bracket area. Do not write the letter itself. So don't. So for instance, if this is A, I haven't got there yet. I don't know if it's A, but suppose it's A, I would just mark an X in the A. I wouldn't write A on the side. Okay, so don't write the letter anywhere. Just mark the box. If you write the letter anywhere, that counts as not filling the exam out correctly, and you're not going to earn those 5 points. Okay, let's get moving. What is a statement operator? I'm just going to read through all 5 options. By the way, select the best answer unless it says more than one answer is okay. So for instance, on 3, you can say, it says you may select more than one answer. If it doesn't say that, implicitly you're limited to one answer, and in those situations, you should just select the best one. Even if there's, a second one that's okay, but it's not great, select the best one. Okay, what is a statement operator? A, it is a word or words that create a compound statement from one or more component statements. Well, that's exactly what a statement operator is. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be A. I doubt anything better is going to come along, but let's go ahead and read them all. Something that puts 2 atomic statements together into a compound statement. Well, that's not horrible, because statement operators do put atomic statements together into compound statements. The problem with B is that statement operators aren't limited to atomic statements. They can put compound statements together also into bigger compound statements. So A is better, because A says it creates a compound from one or more component. What component leaves it open as to whether the component is atomic or compound, which is actually the way that statement operators work. They can work on atomic or compound. So even though B isn't horrible, it's not false, it's still not completely true, because it says that it only puts together atomic statements. So A is still better than B. A word that changes something that isn't a statement into something that is a statement. That's not even close. Anything that changes statements into parts that are not themselves statements. That's also not even close. So the answer is A. And by the way, if I write A out here like this or over there or anywhere, I just failed to earn my 5 extra points. Don't do that. Only this. All right, number 2, also 10 points. Which of the following must be true of a deductive argument? Only one answer is correct. If it has all true premises, it is sound. No. If this said valid argument, if it said what of the which of the following must be true of a valid argument, then A would be good, because if an argument's valid and has all true premises, it's sound. But if it's deductive and invalid, which it could be, this just says deductive. It leaves it open as to whether the deductive argument is valid or invalid. Then A doesn't apply. B, if it has all true premises, it's cogent. Well, that's even worse than A, because cogent doesn't even apply to deductive arguments at all. Cogent is an inductive argument that is strong and has all true premises. C, if it has a false conclusion, it is invalid. That's also not true, right? You can have a deductive argument that's valid, but it has a false conclusion. It just must also have one or more false premises if that's the case. So it's going to be none of the above. None of those are actually accurate characterizations of a deductive argument. Which of the following are atomic statements from the following passage? You may select more than one answer. Now, when it says you may select, that doesn't necessarily mean that more than one answer is true. It could still be one, but it means it could be 2, 3. So let's see. If Maria had written the paper on time, she would have passed, but Maria didn't pass, so she wrote the paper on time. All right, let's just go through them all and see. Maria wrote the paper on time. Yeah, that's an atomic statement. It shows up here as part of this conditional. Remember, we're not going to worry too much about verb tense and modality. So Maria did write the paper. Maria had written the paper on time. For our purposes, those are the same. But it also shows up here. She wrote the paper on time. She clearly is referring to Maria. So that one is definitely there. B, if Maria had written the paper on time. Well, the problem here isn't the verb. It's not the fact that it's had. It's the fact that it's if. This isn't atomic because it's got like this statement operator here. This is actually an ungrammatical thing that was carved off. So that B is not a good answer. If the if weren't here, it would be an atomic statement, but that if means that it's not. C, she would have passed. And again, she means Maria. So Maria would have passed. She would have passed. Maria would have passed. So that's fine. Maria would have passed. Well, that basically means the same thing as C. So either C and D are both just saying the same thing. One's just using a pronoun instead of the full name. Maria didn't pass. That's not atomic because it's got this NT in it. She wrote the paper on time. That's the same as Maria wrote the paper on time. So that's just the same as A. So basically, all 4 of those are legit atomic statements that show up. The only 2 that aren't are these 2, and that's because they're not atomic. This is a statement, but it's negated. This isn't even really a statement because it's got this if in front of it. So it's not even a conditional because it doesn't have the then. That's just an ungrammatical aberration. Okay, number 4. What is the main operator of the following compound statement? If either Bowie or Hendrix had not been admitted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, then the institution would have no legitimacy and nobody would go there. So there's loads of operators. We've got if, either, then, and, a lot of that going on. There is a comma here, and it's right next to a then, which is part of the conditional operator. So I'm thinking that probably the conditional is the main operator. And I'm just going to see if that works. So if I make the conditional the main operator, that's what it would look like. And that kind of makes sense. That looks right. If all of this stuff, either Bowie or Hendrix had not been admitted to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, then this thing, the institution would have no legitimacy and nobody would go there. Yeah, that's totally what it is. The conditional is the main operator. Number 5, decide whether the following statement is true or false. So this is a question on the syllabus. Read the syllabus. Just kind of understand the policy. The syllabus isn't particularly tricky. It just tells you how the class runs. According to the syllabus, a small amount of extra credit is available for students if they submit their solutions to exercise in the text. Okay, this one is a little bit strange. Usually the answer to this, this is false. Okay, it's only this quarter that I've made this exception. So don't worry, you're not going to get this question on the actual quiz. So normally this would be false because the syllabus actually says there is no extra credit typically when I teach this class. So usually when I teach this class, this would be false. This particular quarter, it's actually true. You can get some extra credit by doing this. I don't know if that's in the syllabus or not, but I'm just going to say false because I'm going to put this video is going to be available more than just this quarter that I'm doing this, which is fall 2016. And normally there is no extra credit, and so this is false. So I'm going to put false here so that future generations of students aren't misled. Okay, so that's page 1. Let's move on to page 2. And by the way, if you are a student in a future iteration of this course, don't worry about the fact that there was one quarter that had extra credit and your quarter didn't. It's really not that much extra credit. Okay. Translations. Translate the following statements or arguments from English into formal notation. 6, 7, and 9 are multiple choice. So 6, 7, and 9 on the next page are multiple choice. 8, 10, and 11 are not. So 8, and then there's 10 and 11. Oh, that's a typo. There is no question 11. Okay, forget that. I need to fix that in the textbook. So 8 and 10 are not. There is an optional question, but we'll get to that. So let's go with 6. If Cecilia doesn't get a new car, I won't either. So in this case, you have to select both appropriate atomic statement translation and the overall translation. So first off, you can just eliminate some of these options if they are not atomic statements that are being assigned capital letters. So for instance here, I won't either. Well, that's a negation. Plus it's also not whatever, but that's a negation. So this, we can rule A out already because it's saying that I is a compound statement. We can also rule out B. Cecilia doesn't get a new car. That's not atomic. Okay. Cecilia gets a new car, I get a new car. Cecilia gets a new car, I get a new car. Okay, so it's going to be C or D. Both of these are okay because both of these are assigning letters to actual atomic statements. So if we let C be that and I be that, which one is it? If Cecilia doesn't get a new car, so this is saying if not C, then I won't either means I also won't get a new car is what that's saying. Then not I, because yeah, I get a new car. Okay, so this will be if not C, it's if, so the not C is the antecedent. So it's not C, then not I, C. That's the answer right there. Number 7. Also 10 points. Using the letters assigned to atomic statements, so these here, select the correct translation. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to translate this, but this is already given to me. The reason these are already given is because if people select different letters, then we can't make it multiple choice because we can't guess what letters you're going to use. So I'll just use these letters. I'm going to plug these in. I'll be a billionaire if either I can finish this time machine or make friends with Steve Jobs. So I'll be a billionaire. B, if either I can finish this time machine. T, or make friends with Steve Jobs. Or J. Now the only tricky thing here is that there's two operators. There's an if and an either or. So the question is, which one is the main operator? Is it if, is it a conditional, or is it this disjunction? You can sort of see it's got to be the conditional, right? Because there's two ways to do it. I could say B if that. So this would be the antecedent, that's the consequent. But if we try to make the disjunction the main operator, it would be something like B if either T or J. How would we do that? So what would be, maybe you try to do it like that. So it's a disjunction, one disjunct is J, the other disjunct is B if either T. That doesn't make sense. So you can't, there's really no way, because of the either or, to make this work. Now, if the word either were not here, right? Suppose the word either weren't there. We cross that out, and we had B if T or J. Well, then it would work, right? Then it might be ambiguous, because it could be a disjunction. One disjunct is J, the other disjunct is this conditional, B if T, right? That would make sense. But the fact that the word either is there kind of forces us to realize that this isn't a possible interpretation. So it's going to be this. So it's a disjunction. I'm sorry, it's a conditional. What's the antecedent? Well, the antecedent is the thing following the if. So this is going to be the antecedent. So we have T or J. B is going to be the consequent. And there we go, D. If T or J, then B. So that's that. Now, this one is not multiple choice, so I just get to sort of do this on my own. So I'm going to first identify the atomic statements. So it's either both Marcus and Jane are lying, or so we've got Marcus is lying and Jane is lying. So I'm going to use M equals Marcus is lying. J equals Jane is lying. Or your mother is lying. What letters did I use? I can't use M for mother. I'll go Y for your mother. Y equals your mother is lying. I can't use M because I've already used M for Marcus. Okay. Unless either you are misremembering. So I've already got Y, you are misremembering. M for miss, I can't use that, so I'll just go R. I'll put that here. R equals you are misremembering. Or the liar is you. Make that L. Liar. The liar is you. Okay, quick note. You are misremembering. Miss doesn't count as a negation. So for our purposes in this class, something is only a negated statement if it has a not in there, right? So, you know, the liar is not you, that would not be atomic. The liar isn't you, that would be atomic. Or if it's got a false, you know, it's not true that the liar is you, or it's false that the liar is you. So those are the things that tell you it's a negation. Something like, you know, you are strong. That is not the negation of you are weak, because you are strong doesn't have a not anywhere or an NT or a false. So it's only something that's explicitly negated. Misremembering isn't a not. Because misremembering isn't the same thing as not remembering. That's another way to think of this particular case. All right. Now I'm going to rewrite. And remember, when I rewrite, I'm going to leave all punctuation in. So either both M and J or Y, comma, unless either R or L. All right, we have a comma here, which is right next to unless, so I'm going to just assume unless is the main operator, unless for some reason that doesn't work out. But this is going to work out, right? If I make unless the main operator, everything's fine, right? Either R or L, there's nothing grammatically weird about that. Either both M and J or Y, that's also fine. So using unless as the main operator works out. And remember, unless, we're just going to translate that as a disjunction. Okay, that's just going to be that. Now, some of you have this intuition that unless is kind of a conditional. That's not wrong, okay? As we'll see in chapter 4 explicitly, conditionals and disjunctions are related. You can translate back and forth, but you have to negate one of the components when you do that. Translating it as a disjunction is just easier because you don't have to negate anything. So whenever you're translating in a quiz or exam, unless is just disjunction. It's just a wedge. Okay? Just do it that way. You'll get full points. Everyone's happy. All right, so the first disjunct is this, second disjunct is this. This is going to be easy because this is just another disjunction. This is just going to be R or L. This one is going to be a little tricky because this also has two operators. It's got a disjunction and a conjunction. So this is just going to be R or L. That's going to be easy. That's just going to be a wedge. Now the question is, with this disjunct, is it a conjunction or is it a disjunction? There's two ways to do it. Either, so here's one way. This is saying either this or that. So the whole thing is a disjunction is the main operator, and the two disjuncts are this conjunction and Y. The other way, how would you try to do it the other way? How would you try to make this the main operator? You'd maybe have to try to do this, and that doesn't work, right? If you try to make this the main operator, you get something like either both M as one conjunct, and then J or Y is the other conjunct. That doesn't work. So the initial idea was right. It is a disjunction. First disjunct is this, second disjunct is that. So we're going to get, I'm going to use brackets here, M and J or Y. That's a bracket. Unless R or L. Okay, so just to recap, unless, disjunction. Second disjunct is either R or L. Okay, I've got that. First disjunct is a disjunction. It's saying either both M and J or Y. So it's a disjunction. First disjunct is M and J. Second disjunct is Y. And that's a little messy, so I'm going to rewrite it just to make sure that whoever's grading this sees correctly what I'm doing. Bracket, parenthesis, M and J or Y or R or L. Okay. That's page 2. Let's move on to page 3. Given the assignment of letters to atomic statements, so this assignment here, we've already got D equals I can go to Disneyland. Decide which translation is correct. So this is a translation of an argument, not a statement. Okay, but it works the same way. I'm just going to plug these back into this, sort of rewrite it in half English, half formal notation, and then see where we are. So if I can't go to Disneyland, then you can't. So that's going to be if not D, then not Y. So first is going to be if not D, comma, then not Y. 2. And if I can't remember, if it starts off with a conjunction, ignore it. So that doesn't even count as being there. If and I can't go if you tell my wife your sister is going. So I can't go, that means I can't go to Disneyland. Sometimes you do have to fill in things that aren't mentioned if it's obvious that that's what's intended, because English lets you leave things out sometimes if they're obvious, but the statement isn't necessarily what's actually written down, like what has ink next to it. The statement is what it's clearly saying, and this means I can't go to Disneyland. In the written English, that got left out, but it's still obviously what it's saying. So that's still going to be not D. If you tell my wife your sister is going. If S. Okay, so that's a conclusion marker. Therefore, number 3. If you want to go to Disneyland, so if W, comma, you can't tell my wife your sister is going. Because you tell my wife, you can't tell my wife. Yeah, that's not the greatest example, because you tell my wife, the negation of that would be you don't tell my wife. You can't tell my wife. That's a little bit of a stretch. Maybe I should change this example a little bit. But it's close enough. That's just not S. If W, so if you want to go to Disneyland, you can't tell my wife. W, not S. Not S. Okay. By the way, if there's ever something like this on an exam, you're really not sure, is this supposed to be the same statement or not? First off, there's a big clue here, right? Because there isn't any, you can tell my wife your sister is going. That wasn't one of the options, because we did this for you. So that's already a clue that it really should be this. But if it was one that was not multiple choice, where you had to select your own letters, and you weren't sure if you should treat this as, you can't tell my wife as the negation of you do tell my wife, you can always just ask. Just come down front and say, hey, I've got a question on the exam. Be quiet about it, but you can do that. All right, so this is half English, half notation. Now let's go into full notation. This is a conditional. That's going to be easy. If not D, then Y. If thing following if is antecedent, so not D is the antecedent. So 1, not D, then not Y. 2, also a conditional. S is the antecedent. It's also using if. S is the antecedent, so it's going to be S, horseshoe, not D. Therefore, 3, if W, not S. So W, so again, it's conditional. If W, W is the antecedent, W, not S. And now we just look and see which one it is here. And it's A. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, I didn't have to work all this out. Maybe you could have just kind of like done it in your head a little bit, eliminated a few of them and then figured out that it was A, kind of done it in your head. Again, for the multiple choice questions, if you get the answer right, you get the points. The TAs aren't going to look at the work you did. So even if there's no work, if you get the answer right, you're fine. I will go ahead and do this if I were doing this exam, just to make sure that I get the right answer. Because sometimes if you're doing things in your head, especially with conditionals where people can flip them sometimes in their head, I just go ahead and write it out. Why not? The only reason not to is if you're crunched for time. And if you're that crunched for time, you should practice more so that you're not crunched for time. Okay. Number 10. Translate the following argument into formal notation. Okay, so now we've got some work to do here. If that powder was baking soda and the oven was working correctly, then the bread would have risen. If the oven weren't working correctly, the muffins wouldn't have baked well. But the muffins did wake bell. Nice. The muffins did bake well, and the bread didn't rise. So that powder isn't baking soda. Okay. So that powder is baking soda. I'll just use is. What letter? Powder. P. I'm going to move all the way over here to make sure I have enough room. P. That powder is baking soda. If that powder was baking soda and the oven was working correctly. So I'll just say the oven is working correctly, and I'll call that O for oven. O. The oven is correctly. Then the bread would have risen. Would have risen, I'd say the bread would rise, or whatever. The verb tense, don't worry about that. I'm just going to call this B for the bread rose, let's just say. That's close enough. If the oven weren't working correctly, I've already got that, the oven is working correctly, the muffins wouldn't have baked well. Okay, so that would be the muffins did bake well, or just baked well or something like that, and I'll call that M for muffins. The muffins baked well. But the muffins did bake well. Okay, I've already got that. And the bread didn't rise. I've already got the bread rose. So that powder isn't baking soda. I've already got that powder is baking soda. Okay, so I've got all the atomic statements. Now I'm just going to rewrite the original argument in half English, half notation. And I get, if that powder was baking soda and the oven was working correctly, so this will be 1. If P and O, comma, then B. All right, number 2. If the oven weren't working correctly, so if not O, comma, the muffins wouldn't have baked well, not M. Three. But the muffins did bake well. That's just M, but M. Remember, if a sentence starts with a conjunction, we can just leave it out. I'll leave it out in the next step. I'll just keep it in for now. But M. 4. And we do, again, we've got a sentence starting with a conjunction. We can ignore it. The bread didn't rise. So that's just and not B. So the powder isn't baking soda. So that's therefore 5. So is a word telling us that that's the conclusion. That powder isn't baking soda, so that's just not P. Not P. And this is going to be pretty easy. This is all pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to copy it again in formal notation. 1. If P and O, then B. That's easy because we have if P and O, then B. The comma, I mean, it's just obvious, but the comma makes it super obvious that this whole thing is a conditional. P and O is the antecedent, B is the consequent. So we have P and O, then B. 2. If not O, not M. It's also a conditional. Thing following if is the antecedent, so it's not O as the antecedent, not M as the consequent. Not O, not M. If not O, then not M. 3. But M, just ignore the but. We've got M. 4. And not B, ignore the and. We have not B. Therefore, 5, not P. Tilde P. And that's that. Okay, so that's the regular part, the 10 questions that are the regular part of the exam. There is an optional question, which I'm going to do now. Remember, according to the syllabus, I'm going to call these puntos. These aren't points. So if I do the optional question, the 10 points I get aren't added because these aren't points. This is the Spanish word for point, punto, just to make it obvious that these aren't points. There's a separate tally for these. Remember, read the syllabus to clarify that. But for people who are doing the optional questions, here it is. Translate the following statement into formal notation. A candidate's winning all the delegates is sufficient for that candidate receiving the nomination, but it is not necessary. So I'm just going to say D for winning the delegates. D equals. By the way, if you are doing the optional material and you read the optional material thing, you will know that one of the things mentioned there is that with necessary and sufficient conditions, sometimes they're not using complete sentences. Okay, that's why here, I'm just mentioning this for people who are watching this video but didn't read the optional material section. You're going to see me use incomplete sentences here and think, hey, we shouldn't do that. Well, you're right, you shouldn't do that if you're not doing the optional material. And for the other 4 operators, don't do that. For the conditional words that we're using in the main material. For necessary and sufficient conditions, you kind of have to allow for non-complete sentences. So don't worry about that. So I'm going to let D equals candidates winning all the delegates. And what's the other one? Receiving the nomination. I'll just say N is candidate receives the nomination. Okay. I'm going to rewrite, and I get D is sufficient for N. But it is not necessary. Now, you kind of have to fill this in a little bit. But it is not necessary. Well, what's the it, and what is it not necessary for? It is D. So a candidate's winning all the delegates is sufficient for receiving nomination, but it, candidates winning all the delegates, is not necessary. For what? For N. Again, that's just sort of obviously implied as to what that means. That's part of what makes these translations a little trickier. We have a conjunction. It's this and that. These are all conditionals. Remember, sufficient conditions are antecedents. So here it's saying D is sufficient for N. So we have D, then N. D is not necessary for N. Well, D is necessary would have D, remember, necessary conditions are consequence. So that would be N, D, but it's not necessary. So we'd have, it's false that it's necessary for D. Okay, and then the whole thing is a conjunction. So just to sort of bring it all together, we would have if D, then N, and not if N, then D. And that's the final translation. Okay, I don't really know how long that took. I'm sure it took more than 20 minutes because I was going really slow and explaining everything as I went along. But that's how to do it. So study hard and good luck.